So Keplar and McPheeters Bend, obviously two school sites that have not operated this year. They have been closed since June 30th was their last operational day. They have been maintained, they have been cleaned up. Wanted to thank Lori and the maintenance team for, she headed those efforts to make sure everything was surplus, make sure everything was donated to other school sites that could be repurposed. We've got quite the resource for professional development, and it's currently set up and displayed over at McPheeters Bend, just to house the equipment and the books and materials for right now. They also are holding our bookmobile materials until our bookmobile is done, and we are making progress with that thanks to the help of the wood shop at Volunteer and others. Regarding Keplar and McPheeters, I sent an email about 6 or 7 weeks ago regarding 3 options to consider for Keplar. And I'll just read that into the record. We met with bond counsel, Melissa and I met with bond counsel, the comptroller's office, and state government officials regarding the QSCAB grant amounts remaining and the general sale of Keplar if we for sure go down that road. And just to back up, the board had given me the green light to pursue options regarding the potential sale, and you had some questions regarding that. Number one, we can proceed with the process of appraisal, establishing a potential fair market value and listing options for receiving bids and for the property and the assets on the property. And this is Keplar. It's roughly an 8-acre property, so it would include the acreage, the septic system that is on site, the solar system that is on site, and everything contained within the borders that we own. 2 options remain for dealing with the QSCAB loans. Number one, we can redeploy to another qualifying site within Hawkins County. I asked the group when we were on that conference call about moving that equipment to Hawkins Elementary, since we have approval to use the ESSER funds to upgrade their HVAC equipment there at Hawkins Elementary. The group stated that this could be an approved redeployment of these funds to help divert ESSER to other qualified instructional supports. So something we found out on that call was we don't necessarily have to move the equipment, we have to repurpose those dollars to meet the needs at another qualifying site. We still have balances on those loans, as you know, the 2009 and 2010 issuances of the QSCAB loans. So we could feasibly, under this option A, under 2, we could develop a plan, submit the plan to this group for approval, and list that we are installing a new HVAC system at Hawkins Elementary, currently already approved under ESSER. And if that qualifies, we move those QSCAB loans over and we can redeploy ESSER funds to other qualifying projects within the county. So it's a win-win for both schools, whoever those schools are that benefit, in this case Hawkins Elementary plus others. The second option is that we can negotiate or attempt to redeem or pay off the dollar amount of the outstanding interest and principal. But this option would cost us over $38,000 more than option A, which I just described. So if we chose to simply pay it off for whatever reason and not redeploy those funds through QSCAB to Hawkins, for example, we could potentially do that, but it would come at a cost of $38,000.
Is that the total cost on the loans right now?
No.
That is $38,000, or is that just what option 2 would, or B would be?
That's just in addition to paying it off.
In addition to paying it off. So you've not actually said what the balance is.
The loan amount remaining on 2009 issuance is nearly 1.1 million, and on 2010, 1.1 million. And there's a mixture of those funds being deployed at both sites. So because of the pay down rates, because of the monies that are drawn early, and then the subsidiary subsequent amounts of money from those loans used as the projects are developed and implemented, it just depends on what what we're looking at as far as what's remaining at Kepler and what would be remaining at McPheeters Bend, but those are the total amounts from the 2009 and 2010 issuances.
Now, was that for both schools or just Kepler? That you said, 2009 is still 1.1.
That's what I was just
2010.
saying, there's a mixture of funds used at both sites.
So it's both
there's-
sides, not
yeah.
just Kepler.
Correct, so there's an issuance or a series issued in 2009, and then there was a series issued in 2010. And then 2009 has a balance of 1.073, and 2010 is nearly 1.1.
In that option A, that equipment potentially could just stay on site.
In that option A, we would leave the equipment, we would just repurpose the funds
Right.
that were used to purchase that equipment to another qualifying site.
If at the same time we sold the property, we'd have to parcel that out and keep that little plot, or how would that work?
No, so we're talking about the HVAC system, so they would stay intact as part of the building if it was sold. We would just redeploy those funds through this application process, the remaining funds in that loan to Hawkins Elementary, for example.
Okay.
So the building would stay intact with all of the equipment as you see it from the road right now.
Which should it make it bring more money?
Correct. And that is something that we talked about with the comptroller on the conference call. We want to sell as complete of a building as possible, especially if a church is to get it or somebody that wants to come in and make use of portions of it right away while they do some upgrades or whatever the case is, or remodel for their purposes. We want to make it as usable as possible. So obviously my recommendation there, probably a little bit of a no-brainer, but I would recommend we go with 2A and come up with a plan to redeploy the unused QSCAP loan amounts and redeploy those loan amounts to a project that's necessary within the county, such as Hawkins Elementary, which is on the docket right now to be done.
And would be paid for.
It would be paid for through QSCAP, and we could use those ESSER funds that we have currently set up for Hawkins and redeploy those elsewhere. Another good bit of good news is that number 3, the board can specify the intended use of the property in the listing. And an example of the verbiage used there was, Hawkins County Board of Education would like to specify that the Kepler Elementary site property be purchased by a church, community resource, or like agency. And we would work with our attorney to get the right language there, but in essence, you're saying that you're willing to take into consideration that it would benefit the community, and you would give preference to an organization such as a church or community resource center type organization to purchase the property.
And
make
this is
use of it.
specified that it's the facility and the acreage
Correct.
as a property.
It is the property would include all of that. Yeah.
And the solar panels would go with the property.
Yes, there's little or nothing we can do to split that at this point. So,
I actually, on the original agreement that we signed with the solar company, number 11 on that states that the board agrees that should it sell any of the schools listed on the attached, which I think he gave you
I
the
gave you the attached.
attachment. The terms of this agreement shall be disclosed to the purchaser, and the purchaser shall agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement as a condition of the purchase of said building. So whoever we sell this to would have to agree to keep up an internet connection for them, and then
But they would.
they would receive the
They basically pick up. what
they
we
picked
get
up
off.
where ours leaves off. So it doesn't really affect us, other than we will lose. Let's see. Here. Kepler right now is $1,750 a year, my phone went crazy.
The other one's the same.
And the other one's the same, so, we would lose basically $1,750 per site.
It's probably gonna be a
That's
little.
yearly, isn't it?
That's
yearly.
annually,
But it's
yes.
probably gonna be a little less than that because we just finished out our first 10 years with the program, which we got a preferred rate of. Originally, the original rate was 12 cents per kilowatt hour. They added 10 more cents to that as a preferred rate to get as an extra incentive for us to do it. So now that we've been in 10 years, that incentive period's gone away, so we're reverting back to 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So these rates are gonna go down per year what we're bringing in.
So it's probably gonna be closer to $1,200 per
Yeah.
site.
Now, somebody that's coming in and using that as a community resource, such as a church, and I did meet with one church over there and let them tour and look around and ask questions. And I'd be willing to do that with anybody that is interested in the property. But if somebody were to come in and use it for those purposes, they probably would see a little benefit from the solar. But when we're operating 19 different sites and generating the power needs that we generate, it's minuscule if you take two smaller portions out of that mix. It doesn't hurt us too bad, and you just heard that dollar amount. So, and we're out of a long-term contract that probably is benefiting us very little at this point, especially when we're not operating the facility as a school.
How much are we paying right now to keep the lights on and, I don't know, water's shut off, isn't it? So we don't have any heat in there, do we?
No, we have heat.
We do have.
We keep everything, it's just like a normal setbacks as our unoccupied times. So it's 55, 85.
So if it goes above 85, the air's gonna cut on. If it goes below 55, the heat's gonna cut on.
Kind of like you would if you were on vacation.
Yeah.
Exactly. But like you said, the water right now is shut off at both sides, so it's just the minimum payments, which one is $114
Per month,
per month, and the other one is 80 something a month.
and that's water.
That's your base pay on water. Power bill for both has been bare minimum. I think Kepler's, and I don't quote me on this, it was like,
I'll take the estimate.
I would say it's $200 last month. It wasn't anything. I was like, well, I paid more than that.
Oh, yeah. That at McPheeters Bend, because we're using the facilities, it's actually costing more, isn't it?
The power bill, but it's still less than what it was when we had.
What would it have been on a normal?
We're not, just to be clear, we're not using it currently.
So it's on vacation right now
We have
too?
been.
What I would call on
We have
vacation.
been in there and cleaning, Lori and her team, and then they've been organizing the libraries and cleaning up things that can be used in the future, things that we're discarding, things that have gone to surplus, and it's completely wrapped up right now, so it's just sitting there in limbo.
On vacation.
On
The
vacation.
only time they cut on, all these bards have occupancy sensors. So the only time they actually cut on and actually run the 55, 85 is normal. That's where they're gonna stay, unless somebody walks in the room.
Then it goes to
Then the thermostat will actually come on and say, oh, okay, you've got it set for 72 degrees, and then it'll start. They don't, even if they go in to look at books, if they go into one room, only that one room cuts on.
and once it does not sense motion in 15 minutes, it cuts off. Very minimal usage at either side.
Yeah.
I like that too.
Hey, it does. Honestly, it saves a lot to have those occupancy sensors on it.
So,
And they're
moving
called
forward,
Hawkins. I was gonna write that down.
We have already surplus Kepler, so now we're to the point,
We've surplused all of the internal contents.
right,
Yeah.
but we also voted to go ahead and surplus the school itself, is that correct?
I believe you gave me the green light to do the research for that purpose.
Okay,
I just need direction, probably through the form of action on Thursday to go into the official process for Kepler, if that's still the board's decision, to seek us selling that through proper legal avenue, with the specificity of intending it for a community resource type organization if that's the board's desire. And then separate and apart from that, we just need to know what the board's prerogative is for McPheeters, and I've got a list of things we would use it for if we were able to keep that facility on the far end of the county. But I can go over that at any point. So two different things, and we can separate them if it's easier to deal with one. And,
Yeah, we're on this one, let's do them one at a time. Let's put, so what we would need to do as a board is to come to a consensus if we want to specify the intended use of Keplar. Number one. Number two, if we wanted to use option 2A or 2B. And number three is how to market the property, whether that be at auction or through a real estate agency.
Well, to be clear, even if it goes for auction, we can use a real estate firm to assist with that auction process and the appraisal.
Or we can always do sealed bid and put a minimum, and have a minimum price.
And I would utilize, go through Mr. Phillips, and if he declines that, then we would seek out a real estate attorney to make sure we're doing that the right way.
So how do we move forward with the recommendation? Any input? All input's welcome. That's how we best to handle these issues.
And just to help, I do recommend we go with 2A, just for the redeployment of those remaining funds, so that we're repurposing those loan amounts at the great rate that we have those, and for the purpose they're intended is HVAC. We've got an HVAC project right down the road that's in need of that, so.
Well, let's break this down. Is everybody in support of 2A? So that would be part of it. The next would be number 3.
I'm in support of that too.
Okay.
Say again what number 3 is. I was busy writing stuff in.
Specify use.
Can you,
You got it. Oh, it's on
go
there.
ahead and read it.
Oh, okay, I got it. Okay, I got that.
Okay, and then, the last one is to give our director direction on how to and who to talk with.
Is there a way on that number 3 to make it to where it's not, to where if there's no community, agency or church or, of course, anybody that wants to buy it, but somebody else comes in and wants to buy it, is there a way to give us an option, after a certain amount of time? Or if you put that stipulation in there, are we kind of stuck to that if it's in the listing?
What I can ask is twofold, is to secure our ability to maintain ownership if the minimum or reserve price is not met, and or the intended use does not match the specific purpose the board has set forth. Then I can see if the attorney would draft something along those lines.
My only concern is if it lingers for 8 months,
Right.
there's a raising rate environment, and people can't afford it anymore, and
Yeah, we did ask about market value, because that came up several times. I said, well, how do you declare fair market value? The building does need some upgrades, depending on who buys it. It's gonna need roofing in 5 or 10 years. Even on our own maintenance plan, it was set for a major overhaul within the next decade at the latest. So I think that when you determine fair market value, their answer was that as long as you put it out and you've received bids and you are going with the highest bid, that is indicative of a fair market value process by which you've gone into to sell surplus public property.
I think one thing, McClure, maybe you can correct me, but I think another thing he meant is, if we have it on the market for 6 months or 3 months, whatever, and no offers, and then John Doe comes along and makes an offer, but he's not with a church or a like-minded group, So then we don't look at his offer, or what would we do?
You can take any action from the board that you would like. The original intent would be for that first auction. If that expires and goes beyond that time period, you can set up another action for receiving any outside bids or any fair market value bids for that property.
Or say in the event we get no bids from church, community resource, or like agency, then
We
our
would
fallback would be, we would accept bids from the general public.
Correct. That'd be a good example of how you go about that. And again, I would work with somebody with that expertise to draft that.
But our objective would be to service the community with this structure.
Correct, and we do have some very interested folks in good uses that are planned for it, so.
Yeah.
So do we set a reserve, or? I'm just going back to where I've been through this process before with the property, well, we all have,
Yeah.
with the property on Main Street. We set, we set an amount, didn't get a bid, and then we finally got a bid, and then it was taken away, and then we had to amend our reserve price, and then we finally sold it for, I won't say no more, but we sold it.
The last.
So how do you want to proceed on that? Or just do a sealed bid for a time frame for church, community resource, or like agencies, see what we get, and if it's something that this board is acceptable to, accept it or decline it, then open it up to the general vote.
That's a good idea.
I think you cover your bases by doing something like that. Preserve your options.
Do you remember what I said?
Yep, so the priority would be to offer it up to church, community resource, or like agencies first. And if the dollar amount and or lack of bidding exists, you would move on to accepting all outside public bids.
Correct.
Sounds good.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do we need to take that to next Thursday's meeting?
I would feel better if there was a vote from the board as a whole regarding officially moving forward with this sale process. And then I would keep you updated on where we're at and timeframe.
Okay, now, can I ask Ms. Jennifer if you could put that on your consent agenda?
Yes. Yeah, well, it's been released. We could put it under new business.
Just put it under new business. And that, in other words, can you write that motion?
Yes, I get what you're saying. Yes, I get what you're asking.
Okay,
I'm a little slow tonight.
so, Kepler, any other comments, questions, or concerns
When are we gonna talk about McPheeters Bend and the
right now?
right now? All right.
Unless you want to come back.
Let's know before Friday.
So we're
Oh,
good
I
on,
do see it on there. I thought it said Kepler. All right.
so we're good?
Here.
Yeah. What you say here?
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, McPheeters Bend.
That's what we said.
We have taken no action or given any direction on McPheeters Bend as of yet. But Matt has some suggestions of the possibilities of keeping it in the fold for a number of different uses for the east end of Hawkins County and the benefit of our students and possibly our adults in that area. So if you would like to take over, please.
One of the questions that came up last time was, why would you keep the property if you felt like it needed to be closed? Well, number one, the cost savings came from staffing that facility with 80-some students and the number of FTEs or full-time equivalent staff we had to have in place that fell outside the BEP because of the small student ratio. That was the same problem at Keplar. If we keep it under ownership by Hawkins County, we would propose using it as a pathways alternative center for students on the upper end that have to go into the expulsion process or appeal process for expulsion, remanded education. We would repurpose at least one classroom for Hawkins County Virtual Academy, where students and or parents could come and get tutoring, because right now they come into Rogersville and meet at Sharon's site at Pathways, because that's where we have Pathways and Hawkins County Virtual Academy. So that would help provide two options for parents and students who are in both of those programs, again, Pathways Alternative and Hawkins County Virtual. We could split and potentially use a classroom or two for a family resource center at the upper end, which would allow families on the upper end to not have to drive all the way into town and meet with April down here in the center of Rogersville. We would purpose at least one classroom for adult ed program and move them out of the modules, mobiles that are behind, between the football field and Pathways, that are very old and becoming unsafe. So we would move that crew. Quinn is one of our teachers there in the adult ed program, and we would like to keep that program open, but it would relocate to potentially McPheeters. Our Hawkins County Volunteer Firemen's Association would like to pair up with our fire science program and offer classes for the community and for our students in the evenings and afternoons after we cease to use it for all school faculties. They would use classroom space, potentially the gym space, potentially outdoor space. Mr. Bill Killen has even developed plans to put a training tower out there in the playground, because it won't be used as a playground, but we could use it as a fire training tower and make it useful to our fire science academies, both from volunteer and from Cherokee, but specifically to that end of the county. Classroom space, the classroom resource space, we would be able to house resources there that can be gathered by teachers on the upper end of the county. Large trainings could be used in the gym because it's a big open space. So those are some of the things that we've talked about. The book bus could be stationed there for upper end use, and it could be stationed down here at Pathways or the central office for this end of the county. But it would give us another location if we were doing an upper end tour and we spent a day at each site. We wouldn't have to drive it back into town every day. We could use it to be housed there at McPheeters and parked on a district-owned property. So there's all kinds of things that we would use it for. I told Chris this, and I've told all of you this. This is the board's decision. I'm just providing you with a plan of what we would use the facility for if we maintained ownership.
I'm wondering what anybody thinks as a con of any of these. Like, I see a lot of pros. Now, I know in the economic study, was there nothing that involved maintenance of that building as a cost save?
It had a roof repair far more recent than what Keplar did, and had bathroom remodels done right within the last decade.
The bathroom remodel was done in 2014. It was done in July 2014. There was some plumbing that would kind of not come into effect unless we actually use the kitchen for a kitchen, because that's where the plumbing issues are. Because the bathroom has new plumbing. The gym would have some plumbing, but for the most part, the difference between Keplar and McPheeters Bend. McPheeters Bend is a building that was built slab on grade. You've got concrete on dirt. Okay, you have concrete pre-stressed panels that were used for the roof. You have brick walls. It's basically a concrete box. Keplar is multi-white brick walls that have wood framing for the flooring and the ceiling, other than the 1960s section, which was slab on grade. So the problem we had with Keplar was the upper section, the 1950s section, which is most of where the structural repairs were coming from. It was all the upper section, the gym, the kitchen, and that main upper section. The lower section is built much like
What
McPheeters Bend is, slab on grade, pre-stressed concrete on the roof. But that's where our problem was. Another problem we had was the sewer plant. There is no sewer plant at McPheeters Bend. It is a septic tank and field lines. There's no, we're not releasing it back into the creek like we do Keplar. We don't treat it and release it. It's held there, and then it's a wheat field. It's not a sewer system like down here. And then of course water lines. We had trouble with both the water lines. That's typical of late 50s, early 60s was galvanized lines. We had problem with those everywhere. But the only thing that was really on McPheeters Bend that is that will have to be done. It will have to be roofed.
The whole thing?
The classroom section of it was done in '09. So you're getting to the point where it's 15 years on a single ply is about the end of its useful life. Okay, you can get
That's
20
all of our schools.
Exactly. You can get 20 out of them.
That's why we do 1 or 2 a year.
Yeah, I keep sliding 1 or 2 in there. I'm trying to whittle away, but you can get 20 out of them by babysitting them. Some of them we've had that's on there, been on there 25, but typically 15 years is your limit. The kitchen and dining room area were not roofed when the classroom section was roofed, so that section will need to be roofed as soon as possible.
Speaking of the kitchen, what will we do with that area? Something has to be, we don't want to leave it, if you're not going to use it as a kitchen, what would you do with that?
Well, for example, if the Volunteer Firemen's Association use it on the weekends and evenings, that potentially could be a space for cooking for the guys or for the groups that are training there. It's not going to be a commercial kitchen. It won't have the same type of equipment, but the space can still be used purposefully as that type of space. If we had professional development there, we could use that as a remaining cafeteria. People bring their lunch in. We're not cooking on site, but the purposes of the facility would still stay somewhat intact. It would just not be an industrial kitchen setup like we have. The equipment's been sold, the equipment's being surplus, but we would still have the spaces as they're designed.
Or would have to be plumbing if we use it, you said it would need to be replumbed.
Well, the difference between a replumb for everyday student use with hundreds of students, 80-some students in this case, going through every day versus sporadic use by the public or agreed upon entities utilizing the facility are different. So
The drainage in the kitchen is where we have a big problem. So we would have to dig that out. If we're not using dishwasher, garbage disposal, which is something that we use every day in every school kitchen, we flow a lot of water. We flow a lot of solids through the garbage disposal, through the dishwasher. All that is where our problem lies. The grease trap, that kind of thing. We're loaded heavy. Okay, you won't have that if you're bringing in food. If you're cooking in there once a month, even, But the hood's still in place. All that's still in place, so that we don't have a problem there. We have a problem with everyday high usage.
So are you saying that the septic, because does that go into the septic system?
It does.
So there's a possibility that the septic system up there would have to be redid.
We just pumped it
You just pumped it.
2 years ago.
So the field lines and everything is still in
Everything's
great
still
shape.
perfect. Everything's fine.
Now, I'm going to say this, and because I have actually talked to people that are taxpayers and what their opinion is about these two schools.
I have to.
And I'm glad. Most of them said this very same thing to me, and of course that was mostly on my end, not on the upper end, and I would expect, other people to know what they think, but they want it sold if they're going to sell Keplar. That's what these people said to me, and also, it was about this, that if we use that school up there, we told the students that we couldn't use that anymore. It wasn't cost efficient to use for them. That we're gonna turn right around and we're gonna use it for something else for us. I don't really know, you named a lot of things that could go in the classrooms. I don't have any problems with those, that's not it. It's, okay, are we gonna have to staff? You said something once before
No
about that they
additional
could come
staff.
from.
It's no additional staff.
So how do we get away with that, Matt? I thought about that.
That's easy to address. So pathways, for example, we have, let's say, 8 classes being used. Subjects, different teachers teaching students that are remanded to an alternative setting. Instead of having all 8 on campus at one location, you split them and you rotate them back and forth. And
So do we really need them at pathways down here?
students need.
Because those students will be up there, part of
Correct.
those will be up
Correct.
there.
Correct. So you're taking the students and dividing the number, which allows you to divide the staff and use the same staff at 2 different
Okay.
locations.
Do we know, and this doesn't really probably have anything, but I just when I started thinking about that and about the kids, the people that we said, well, we can't afford to send you back to McPheeters Bend, so we're gonna close the school. Do we know how those kids are progressing that's been moved from Keplar and from McPheeters Bend? Did we keep up with that?
We followed up, but I've been in contact with both Churchill Elementary and Carters Valley principals, and there were adjustments at the start of the year, but the students absolutely love their schools.
Okay, so they're doing fine.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just probably shouldn't have brought that up, but I just really wanted to know.
No, it's a fair question, and it's something the board didn't ask us to do, but that is something we followed up on.
Well, it was something I got to thinking about and thinking about the students. Now, I've also heard tonight that we're probably ready for a roof at McPheeters Bend, which is gonna cost us, guesstimate. You don't have to give me any
I'm gonna look
actual
at, I'm
answer.
gonna look at what I wrote 2 years ago, and then I'm probably gonna multiply it by 2.
Okay, and I understand that, okay? It's just a guesstimate, is all I wanted to know.
Because right now, there again, roofing is petroleum based and let's just do it like this. That's 18,000 square feet. $216,000. That's a guess.
And that's fine.
No more than what we're paying for water and electricity. I mean, it's been the minimum payment on the water, time in, time out, with us out there cleaning out. I don't see your cost as far as energy and water going anywhere. No more use than no more traffic than it's gonna see. It's not seeing that daily traffic like they're talking about every day.
We did that, we actually did a building operation cost several years back. And it was roughly $50,000 a year to operate the actual facility. That's
Used every day.
Yeah, it's used every day.
Right, for use of every day.
Now, I'm sure that's
every
went up,
classroom, cafeteria, kitchen.
but now that was done in 2015.
The next question I had is, and I'm sorry, I hope that these are things you all wanna know too, that if we're gonna have to replace plumbing, are we gonna replace plumbing in the kitchen for these that people might use? Because that's gonna be money too.
I would not replace them until it's needed.
Okay,
You know,
that it is a need that will eventually
if we go
happen
back
with
in,
us.
if we go back
If we
into
use the
using that
school.
as an industrial kitchen, we're gonna have
But
to
right now,
replace
there's
it
not
first.
a need for
Which
it.
Right.
I stated, we wouldn't use it as a school kitchen.
What's the cost of, I'm sorry, the to restaff all these classrooms that we might use. Not just the staffing, but are we gonna have to redesign because we've got different people coming in? I understand the library that we used materials we already have, you know, like from Keplar or wherever, we put those in, but are we gonna have to do other things? Like if the fire department uses it, they furnish everything that they would do. Okay, CTE, if they come in and do, and I'm not throwing you under the bus.
So for example, if fire science were to do trainings in the gymnasium space,
See,
they
people
would-
ask me questions like this, what's it gonna actually cost? But then it always went back to, we closed the school and told the students we couldn't afford them, but then we're gonna turn around and use it. And that's what I'm getting.
I
from
never
people.
said we couldn't afford them, I just wanna be really clear.
It's that we couldn't afford to keep
We-
the school open.
It didn't make financial sense to staff outside the BEP when we had the ability to bring that back into BEP.
No, that was their understanding.
I get that, but I wanna be crystal clear on what was actually
Do
said.
it. I'm through.
Just to give you a general idea, we're down daily cost wise 75.1% as far as interviews.
And again, and Judy, I appreciate the questions. I'll go back to what I led with.
That's typically, that's not.
I'm not saying this is a need. If we have it, we will make good use of it, and I think it will
And I know
benefit,
that.
and it will
I know.
benefit students, and I would say particularly those at the secondary level, at the upper end of the county, and provide them resources they have not had at that end of the county.
Well, I want to be able to answer this when people ask me, because like just everything that I really asked you then, I didn't know. I've learned a lot tonight. I have kept my mouth shut most of the time.
No, I appreciate
So-
your questions.
So, but, you know, when I talk to people and they ask me this, and I know that you all were up on the upper end, and I'm sure your constituents, your people ask these questions, and if mine do. So,
How many staff were at that school when it was last running? Do you know just or an estimate? 9 or so? So that's probably what, as far as like a annual cost of payroll?
Over $500,000 when you factor in salaries, benefits, everything.
and
And I
I get
think
that
that,
too,
you know,
so that's not a problem. I just think, you know, if we're keeping if we close the school because it wasn't feasible to keep it open, then we're selling Kepler because it's not feasible to keep it open.
I guess
I
so.
understand what taxpayers say, well, you know, and they vote for all of us. They want it closed. And I'm just telling you what people that I talk to.
No, I get it. I'm just saying, like, if you were to give them that information like that. even
Well,
with
that's
the
what
roof-
I'm getting tonight.
No, I'm saying, like, even with the roof, even with any kind of maintenance, you know, you're still looking at well below with no extra staff. If there's no extra staff going into the building, like, look at the cost. I mean, and I get it. It's a thing because the school's closed, and I get it. I get why people
Yeah.
feel that.
But if we could take a negative and turn it into a positive and look at the benefits that we could have on the east end of the county by seeing if it's feasible, say for a year, possibly 2, take a look at it, put these programs in place, let it grow, and see how productive the alternative school, the tutoring, the family resource, the adult education, the fire safety training, and reserve space for training, and see how it goes, and at least try to find a positive here. I've been giving this a lot of thought. Think about this. East end of the county, what services do we have from the county? What services? East End County, what services do we have from the county?
Who are you asking?
Anybody. 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 We can pay our taxes a certain time of the year. And we can get our tax. East Hawkins Countyans, that's it. If families need public assistance, where they have to come to.
Rogersville.
If you pay your taxes after the date, now I know electronically you can pay them, you can mail them in, but where do you have to go if you're in East Hawkins County and you pay your property, if you're past the deadline on paying your property taxes, where you go to? Hawkins County seat, which is the county seat. So my point is this, we have an opportunity. And I'm just being devil's advocate here. We have an opportunity to have a facility to provide some type of more services for the east end of the county. I get what you're saying.
And those are questions that I get asked, and probably I would hope that I'm not the only one getting asked those questions. And just the answers that I'm given should be easing people's minds. It should be showing them the need for that.
If it doesn't though, if it doesn't, I think it's valid. I think we should listen to the taxpayer, you know, ultimately, I totally get what you're saying. I think it's valid.
I agree too,
But
but
I don't know, you know, I guess, is it enough to make
To
people?
justify.
Right, yeah. Cause I don't
What
know,
if-
you know.
how would you guys feel about, let's let Matt and his team utilize this for, what would you need? A year?
If we could use it the remainder of this year through next and reevaluate it a year from now.
And see how beneficial these programs are, see how the public responds to this,
We
and
could
then
come
come
with-
back and revisit.
We
And
could
if,
come with electrical costs for the year, we could come with our
and
total
if it's not
costs.
feasible, we surplus it at that time.
Well, we also, you know, and this is another point on, I mean, I got notes and stuff, people say it. If we are doing Kepler, that we really want a community, that to go, you know, kind of to the community, to help the community. Well, we're not given that option with McPheeters Bend. We're just saying, well, we want to
Well,
keep it.
Don't you think?
I think the Volunteer Firemen Association is a
Yes,
huge
yes, it is.
community resource because
But
they don't have.
they're gonna utilize our property. You see what I'm saying there?
I do.
And we're selling Kepler, it's gotta be, they've gotta work out a deal with the community. We're almost like providing that.
And I know
And
this-
I'm not saying, I'm a big advocate of the fire department and all the first responders, but I just think we need to make that really clear that we're not, just picking out one place to do something for it, because
And I get your point. I wrestled with this myself, and Chris and I have talked over, Debbie and I and McClure, I think, recently. What I came to the conclusion on was because we do not have and have not had the resources and the supports that I'm mentioning that we would put at McPheeters, we have not had on that end of the county as far as the school system. The other thing is that if we maintain ownership, we can enter into, as long as we're using it as a school during the day or part-time school, resource for Pathways would use it every day. Hawkins County Virtual Academy may not use it every day, but sporadic as when they need to meet with students or bring them in for tutoring or meet with parents. Resource Center probably would use it a couple times a week. Other PD room, that type of stuff, the lending library, a couple times a week. But what I think we do maintain the ability to do is to enter into multiple facility use agreements. Let's say Rhodes wants to use it to store equipment. Let's say other entities may want to use it down the road. We still maintain it. We're not using the ball fields, we're not using other parts of the facility, but we maintain ownership, and therefore we maintain, while we're paying on those QSCAD loans, the ability to use it for other purposes as long as it's purposeful during the day as a school site.
Maintenance could use it for a storage facility for parts. Is that, so you wouldn't have to run, if you're working at Mount Carmel, you wouldn't have to go all the way back to,
The problem is, inventory is not something we keep. I mean, we can't.
Yes.
There could feasibly be equipment they could put in the gymnasium.
Yeah,
Like, we need to store the lift up there.
pressure washers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead, but
Well, I just wondered if the election commission has expressed interest to continue to use the school.
I was gonna bring that up, the BB store is being used in place of Kepler, which is very small. I hope that works well, but.
There's no parking there.
I know, but they do have something worked out, at least for this initial year. It has come up about McPheeters, and I said, we've got a facility meeting coming up. There is a desire to continue using it. As long as we maintain ownership, we can keep it for that purpose as well.
with what he's talking about with Family Resource Center and alternative school and that space, we have a building up there that's 18,000 square feet. It's not counting the gym. That's the actual concrete building that's 18,000 square feet. Based off of what our architect told us to figure on new construction, if we try to build something to house these programs up there at 18,000 square feet, we're going to be somewhere around $6 million. We have a building right now that is still structurally sound. I'm coming from a building guy. You know, it makes sense to me to keep a structurally sound building when the price of construction is as high as it is right now. That's just coming from me.
All right, we're down to two options.
What are they?
The options are, let's utilize McPheeters Bend the rest of this year and next year to see for these 6 opportunities: alternative school, tutoring, family resources, adult education, fire safety classes, resource space for training. Did I miss anything?
Something else, maybe.
Look, there's other possibilities. When we make a decision, then smarter brains will prevail, right, Brandon?
Shannon, and let me
He's
just
thinking
say
already.
this, because what you just
Let's see the
said
kid's turn.
probably would go further than anything that I've said here tonight to either lean one way or the other. That what you said, and I've always said this about when you sell property, in order to buy it back in today's economy, we might sell for like a small amount, but then it's gonna cost excessive to buy it back. When you said $6 million to house all these things that we didn't have before, space for, you know, right there is the biggest thing that I think that anybody here could say. In order to rebuild it or to build it anew, that's $6 million. We have the space.
I would like to say
Does that make it better?
It does make it better, and I think that the one point about the Hawkins County Virtual Academy, it's grown every year we've had it. It's now, I think, over 150 students, Thomas, close to 120 regular students enrolled, and she did get more for this semester. We started out with a cap of 45, 60 kids.
Yeah.
Those are consistent students that have returned year after year. 22, 23 of them were set to leave our county school system because we didn't have options. For whatever reason, struggled learning in a regular classroom or didn't have the support necessary. And this provides those families an option. We're at capacity with meeting those needs at a site shared with Pathways. One of the biggest pluses I see in maintaining McPheeters is the ability to grow those programs and be able to meet with parents when those demands come up, meet with the students when the demands come up. Right now, we're having to schedule those out because we also have Pathways on the same site. So it's hard for that teacher to carve out that necessary time. But if there was a space set aside at both locations, that allows us the relief valve necessary to grow that program. And I think that Sharon's got the will and the ability and the expertise to do so. She's chomping at the bit to do it. I think we've got a potential to really grow that program and make it what we envisioned early on. As that goes up, the trend is that our Pathways Academy behavior remains decreases. It's not a coincidence that when we give students an option, when we give families an option, behaviors increase and become less that we have to deal with on that serious level.
That's true.
So, this is another question that I just thought of. I'm sorry, but I wanna know it all today. So if we're using Pathways, do we feed them? Do we have a cafeteria staff in there that
Anytime
is
we have-
actually, so we're gonna actually
We
staff
deliver.
the kitchen?
We did not.
Or just gonna
We
deliver?
We're
Okay.
still mandatorily providing meals, but if we have students on campus
We deliver.
for a long
Okay.
period of time of the day, we have to provide that meal. Now, if they're coming in for tutoring and they're part of HCBA, we don't provide meals.
Okay.
They come in, they meet with their tutor, the parents with them, and they leave. But if we
Now,
have
are we paying
pathways
the
up there,
tutors?
if we
Are we paying the tutors?
We have
Or
one
we're providing-
one full-time teacher that has to make use of an empty classroom at Pathways right now in order to meet with parents. If we had this, that'd free up classrooms down here, free up classroom meeting spaces up there.
I told you what made more sense than anything that I've said tonight is what Shannon just said. If we have to provide these things on the upper end and build it anew, that's probably $6 million. And I'm not a big advocate of selling property anyway, even Keplar
I want
property.
so much land.
I said that God only made so much, and once you sell it, in order to buy it back, what are you gonna have to pay for it? So I'm not a big advocate on that anyway, but anyway, those were questions that my people had asked, and thank you all for asking them and being patient with me.
Well, I just enjoy hearing you talk.
Lie.
I really do. Okay, option 2 would be to surplus McPheeters Bend. So that would be the board's wishes. Now, we can make a recommendation of option 1 or option 2, or send both to the full board meeting on Thursday.
2.
Got a recommendation for option 2, that would be to surplus McPheeters Bend.
Oh,
And,
no, I thought we were talking about
no,
with
Kepler's not.
Kepler.
No, we're talking about McPheeters Bend. We've got
I
two
got tore
options.
up. I got tore up.
No, that's Kepler.
That's
We're talking about
Kepler. See, Debbie is
McPheeters
too. Okay.
Okay. I say you go with the first option.
Yeah, I'm for the first one.
Okay, so the first option is keep McPheeters Bend in the fold this year and next year, and try to see what benefits come from keeping it in the fold. Reevaluate at that time. And then at that time, if we surplus it, we surplus it, or if it's a very positive thing for our system, our taxpayers, and our community, we build on it. So would that be the recommendation?
Yes, I'm good with that.
Under new business,
It's fair.
that's the motion, correct?